How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode 199 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode, we're going back to the topic of bulbs. We sort of delved a little bit into it over the last few weeks, but this week is going to be special. We actually have a specialist flower farm, daffodil farm on, and it's Dave and Jules Hardy from Esker Farm, and they are specialist growers of daffodils predominantly, but not exclusively. And I suppose they're experts in it. This is not your stack them high and sell them cheap type effort. This is specialist growers talking about special varieties, all the different divisions, and lots of knowledge. Homegrown in Ireland, which is going to be nice as well, because as we know, a lot of the bulbs are transported in different directions around the world. So it's going to be nice to talk to somebody from a homegrown perspective. So Dave and Jules, you're very, very welcome to Master My Garden podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we've just been chatting about the horrible weather we've had over the last couple of weeks, and I suppose that's not helping your gig. I know you're very much hands-on, and a lot of the work that you do and a lot of the growing that you do and the planting and all of that sort of thing, a lot of the work is done by hand. So it's not like, as I said, it's not like you're stack them high and sell them cheap type of a setup where you're machine digging and all of this sort of thing. It's very much a hands-on. Lots of love and care goes into it. So tell us all about it. It's exciting to have you guys on. And as I said, tell us all about Esker Farm Daffodils.
Right. We our farm, our business started off really as a hobby that really got out of hand a number of years ago. So initially, I started growing a few daffodils. I'd gone to a local meeting. My local garden society had a flower show in spring. I decided I wanted to get a few bulbs and started that, and started off with 10 bulbs, and then it's progressed steadily from there. And it's about 7 years ago now, 8 years ago, and there was a nursery over near Strandford Lock, over near Belfast, south of Belfast. And he was wanting to retire. And he approached us to see if we would like to take on his business. Now as I said, we'd slowly built up our collection over a few years prior to that, and we just started off with our first catalogue, which was an A4 piece of paper folded in half, and that was it. And
very swish. It took us a lot of time to put it together.
And we went from that and jumped really 10 years of our business plan in about 10 months, and we now grow
about 800 varieties.
Yeah.
What?
About 800 different varieties.
Different daffodil varieties. Now, some of those, there might only be one bulb or two bulbs of it because it's one of our own breeding, so nobody else in the world has it. So there's only one or two of them. So we're building up the stock of those. They'll not be available commercially for about another 13, 14 years probably.
Wow.
Just until we get to the point where we have enough stock to sell. And then what other ones we've got bigger quantities. Now, I'm saying bigger quantities, you're talking 150 bulbs of something. As you say, we're not the bring them in cheap, stack them high that some of our counterparts in other countries are. We're more specialist. So a lot of variety within what we have, but not a lot of quantity.
Okay, yeah. So I got to ask you a really kind of silly question, but it springs to mind. If you stand in the middle of the field, you have 800 varieties. Can you name every one of them? Or are you going to have to go away and check a few things, or would you know them all now?
We kind of know most of them.
Wow.
Make a good stab at it, at
You've
least.
got a rough idea of what's what.
When you can see the flower, it's a lot easier. When you're looking at the bulbs, you have no idea.
Ah, yeah, you have no clue.
People say, oh, well, how do you know the difference? It's like, you can't. It's like looking at the sole of somebody's shoe and knowing what their face looks like. You have no idea at all. That people go, oh, but how do you know? We can't, which is why we have to be so careful when we are digging and planting to make sure that the varieties aren't mixed up. We have to be mindful.
That's an incredible quantity, 800 different varieties. And so
growing every year, because we're constantly creating new ones.
Okay.
We do a lot of hybridizing, looking at trying to improve what there is. Like daffodil wise, registered was about 25,000 different varieties of daffodil.
Named
varieties.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of them are no longer about. They're extinct, or maybe in someone's garden and lost in time or whatever. But commercial wise, like you go to Holland, they grow a much smaller amount, but they'll grow hundreds of acres and acres of them, and they will lift them with a machine and so on. Because we're growing so many different varieties, you can't really mechanize that, so we do it all by hand. So all the planting's done by hand, all the digging's done by hand. So it keeps us busy.
Yeah, it takes us most of July to dig what we actually dig for stock and for replanting in. We only left about half of our stock. So we have it split so that if something catastrophic happens to 1 year, you should hopefully still have another stock of it. So we left about 85,000 bulbs by hand.
Wow.
Whereas one of our Dutch counterparts is able to process about 250,000 in an hour, because they're going through with a tractor and what's basically a potato lifter, and they're just lifting. But the whole field is all the same variety. Whereas our 2 acre field, we've got 800 varieties. So you're lifting, that's really a third of that, because we leave it a third of the field fallow. So we dig what's basically a third of the field. So yeah, just about 3/4 of an acre every year.
It keeps you fit, is right. Yeah. So, and when you say by hand, you're literally digging them by fork or?
Yeah. Well, previously we would have done. We grow them in ridges. Yeah. So we like a raised bed, and they're all planted in rows within that, and you get about 10 to 12 bulbs across the ridge. So in line. So previously we would have used a spade or a fork just to dig each of the rows out. The last couple of years we bought some broad forks, which are fantastic.
Yeah.
And that means now we can near enough do the full ridge across at a time. And we've got a nice broad fork and the 2 handles, and you pull it back and then it exposes all the bulbs. You just work your way up those ridges like that.
Brilliant.
So that and then it's just I'm on the broad fork pulling the back, and Jules is there. She picks all the bulbs out, or the children.
Or one broad fork each and work down the ridges, and then we have 1 child each and 1 child to carry.
Brilliant.
Yeah, 3 kids have to earn their keep.
Teamwork, and there's no danger of them mixing up bulbs or anything. They're all well tuned in at this stage.
They know what they're doing, and they're fully aware of.
Because we're just digging a row at a time.
Yes,
we have a marker at the beginning and then a marker at the end, so we know when that variety's done. So whichever child is tasked with the carrying that day, they take, and then you move on. So you have an empty crate then for the next one. So there's
brilliant. And
there's always a risk where, and you'll end up with, as you're digging, there might be a little offset that's left in the ground, and sometimes they get mixed into the next one. But when you're digging them, you can't really tell from one variety to the next. So you try to, as much as possible, you try to keep it so that our variety is in each crate, and we just work our way along.
Yeah. So you guys, you're selling all over the world. Obviously, you sell within Ireland, UK, Europe, and I know you mentioned the other day when we were chatting on the run up to this that you sell quite a lot to the US. So that tells me that like what you have is specialist varieties. People are collecting them. So maybe talk to us a little bit about that. I know you're one of the only websites where you talk about daffodil divisions, or one of the only sellers that I'm aware of that talk about divisions. So tell people about divisions, because I don't think generally people will even understand that. So tell us about the divisions, what they mean, and so on.
Well, often we do talks and so we go around and fairs and different events, and you end up with people first of all going, thinking a Division 1 is the best. Thinking like football, Division 1 is the top division. They're the star ones. Division 2s are not quite as good, and it's nothing to do with that. So first of all, it's explaining. So when you have a catalogue or you want a website, or they need it to be able to, and it's an international recognised way of arranging the daffodils. So if you go to any country and any shows, they'll all be arranged the same way. So a Division 1, and it's all to do with the cup. the trumpet of the daffodil, the
Of
proportion of it. So if you were to bend the petals, if you imagine the petals like ears,
Yep.
and if you bend your ears, the ears in, if the cup sticks past the length of the petals when they're bent in, that's a division 1. So that's a trumpet daffodil.
Okay.
Division 2 is where it's equal down to half. So the cup is shorter and it's between the equal to the length of a petal and half of a petal. Division 3 is then from half down to near enough nothing. Division 4 is a double daffodil, which is like a pom-pom.
Yeah.
So almost like a peony rose type idea.
Yeah.
Division 5 are triandrous. So they're like the thalia, common one everybody will know, like thalia is a division 5. It droops its head down. Division 6 are the cyclaminous daffodils. And the petals on those are reflex back. So I always describe it when we're doing talks that it's like when you see a dog out of a side of a car, with its head out of the window, and the ears are flapping back behind it. So it's just like that.
Yeah.
So that's again with the ears and everything. That's a division 6. 7s and 8s are the scented ones. So 7s are jonquilla and 8s are tizzettas. So tizetta, you often see that there's lots and lots of flowers to a stem, and both of them are very scented. 9 are your pheasant eye, your poet daffodils.
Yeah.
They're often a lot later, April into May. Division 10 is your bulbicodiums, so the hoop petticoat daffodils. 11 are, they're like the Marmite of daffodils. Some people love them, some people detest them. They're the splits, so it's where the cup is completely split open and it's back reflexed against the petals. And that's almost like that's the bad boxer of daffodils, because the nose has been punched and it's splattered across the actual petals itself. 12s are your odd ones where they don't really fit anywhere. So tete-a-tete is a division 12.
Okay.
It doesn't fit in any of the other divisions. And then 13 is the last one. That's the species ones. That's the wild ones. So that's the 13 different divisions, very quickly split up. And then if you're looking at a label, if you're looking at a variety, usually it's got some letters behind it. So there's I'm just trying to think of one now. Greek Surprise, which is a double, is a division 4. So it's a double, division 4.
Yeah.
And then the letters behind it are W and Y. So it means it's white and yellow.
Okay.
So if it's a daffodil and it's a standard looking, traditional looking daffodil with yellow petals, it would be division 1 yellow, so division 1 Y, and then it's got an orange cup, it would be a 1YO. So, and that's just how everybody splits them all up. So it's really, really straightforward once you know what each of the divisions mean.
Yeah, and the divisions aren't just for the standards, that's across whether they're intermediate size or miniature size, that it's to do with the proportions of the cup, because a lot of people assume that the divisions are only for the standard size, but they're not. They cross into the intermediate and the miniature and the micro miniatures as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can have the same characteristics in a flower that is, the size of a 10-cent coin, or a big standard daffodil that's has the same classification.
Okay, so that's why the tete-a-tete was in, what did you say, 10 or 9 or 10? 12. Yeah.
That's one of the...
If you can't find a box, stick it in here.
Okay, so that's the classification, which I was vaguely aware of, but not to that depth. And so there's a lot of people, and I guess a lot of your customers are buying for showing. It will be a certain amount of it, and then obviously there's people who are collectors then as well, like yourself, started off with 7 and ended up with 800. So so the showing of them. So again, it's something that I find showing in general intriguing. Like I was at a show recently, and it was, when was it? It was would have been back in June, I'd say, or July. But anyway, there was no daffodils there, obviously, time of year, but there was different types of flowers. There was roses there, and there was also like even the country fair type, judging the brown bread. You have 10 superb brown breads, but how do you choose one over the other? But when it comes to daffodils and even the roses that I was looking at that day, it's very, very hard to, how do you pick a winner when you have 10 supreme flowers in front of you? So how does that go, and how would you pick something, within a judging competition like that?
Well, it is difficult, and it is, a lot of it is down to the individual person as well, as to what they're like. There are marks for different things. You'll have for form, you'll have for size, if it's true to size. You'll lose nicks if you lose marks, if there's like a slight nick out of it. You have to make sure that they're centered or they're clocked right. So the top petal should be pointing up to 12, the bottom petal should be pointing down to 6. They should be evenly distributed. There's a whole lot of things that go into it, and it can be slightly different if it's a single bloom class or if it's a multi-bloom class. So you can have up to 12 flowers. So you're getting marks for each of the different ones that then goes together as your total. So you might have one flower that just lets you down a little bit because it starts to wilt or look down instead of looking up, or and there's a few tricks to the trade that you can kind of work to manipulate them, but it
is down to the individual,
whoever the judge is at the time.
And like with the show, a lot of our customers would be buying them for the daffodil shows, so they're often staged individually, and they're in the green little bikini vases, they're called. And they'll be packed in with some moss to hold them in place, and you want them looking straight at you. Where sometimes they can droop the head a little bit, and so you've got to manipulate them a little bit. But then again, it depends on some of the miniature, some of the smaller ones and species ones. They're really suited to like alpine growers. So you got a lot of that, and they will be growing them in pots and bringing them as a full pot or something. So it depends on what people are growing them for. And we have a lot of customers that don't show at all and just want something nice in the garden, and just something a little bit unusual, and just have them in pots or and often the names, because they've got so many different names as well. It might be a name that
catches their eye or they can relate to.
And they've got somebody in their family that is of that name. I was doing a sale last week, and a girl was just walking past, and she went, "Oh, there's a daffodil with my name." So I went, "Oh, hello, Lauren." She went, "How do you know what my name is?" And I said, "Well, I know I'm selling a daffodil called Lauren, and that's the only one that I have that's a girl's name. So unless your name is Vivash, it has to be Lauren." She went, "Oh my goodness." So she bought a bag of Lauren because her name was Lauren. She wasn't planning on buying daffodil bulbs, but when she saw that it was her name, she's like, "I have to have it, have it." So we get people like that, or for a special anniversary or birthday or something like that. There's a variety called Birthday Girl. There's a variety called Ruby Wedding. So we've had people looking to buy as a present for somebody a voucher towards buying it because maybe it's the wrong time of year. So they look ahead and think, "Oh, well, when it's the right time of year to lift, can I get 10 bulbs of that for my friend or my husband or brother," whatever it happens to be.
And it's just because there's so many different varieties and so many different shapes and colours. Like, till I started growing daffodils myself, my view of a daffodil was it was a yellow trumpet, and that was when I grew up. That was all I ever saw. It was a daffodil was yellow. It had a trumpet cup, and it was out in March, April time. And it was only after starting going to a couple of the local shows, and that's what got me hooked. And you could see, I didn't know they came white or pink or
green or autumn flowering. We have daffodils in our greenhouse flowering at the minute. Because they're autumn flowering ones, which people go, "That's not a daffodil." No, it definitely is.
And what variety is that now? So that's not going to flower outside at this.
It's bred from a species variety called Viridiflorus. They come from Morocco into southern Spain. So they will flower naturally there's lots of autumn flowering ones that will flower now, and they're really geared towards once that area gets its first heavy rainfall, then they suddenly come into flower. And so that's that. Now they've been bred. This one that we've got is a hybrid. It's called Verdant Sparks. So again, it's size-wise, it's tiny little thing, vivid green color,
and it's very starry. So the petals are all, you know, very, very pointed and reflex back. Unlike they wouldn't look like, somebody wouldn't look at it and go, oh, that's definitely a daffodil, because it doesn't look rounded and the obvious yellow cup.
It's not your typical.
No, it's not.
But it's a bit more. That one's a little bit more difficult to grow. The autumn ones, you tend to have to grow. Well, here we would have to grow them in a glass house. You need a bit of heat in the summer. We're not. You couldn't really grow them out in the garden. But majority of daffodils are grand. They normal run-of-the-mill ones. We grow them all in the field, field or raised beds outside, and they're tough as old boots. But some of this, as I said, the autumn flowering one, they're a little bit more need a little bit more work to them.
You on your website you have other bulbs as well. Are you growing those as well, or is it just the daffs you grow? So you're growing all the other ones, so fritillarias, camasias, tulips.
We specialize in lots of, as I said, we specialize in bulbs. So we've got lots of other things that we're trying to, again, it's just things that we've collected over time and we've just been slowly building up. And now that we've got more and more of them, we've got a small surplus that we've got, and we think, right, well, we've got enough of them, we can put a few on the website. So selection of fritillaria, coriodalis, crocus. We've got a big collection now of galanthus that we've been building up over the last few years.
That's maybe only, you know, 2 or 3 of a bulb that we would have. It's not 200. So somebody, we get phone calls all the time. Hi, I'm looking for, you know, a 5 kilo bag of something. It's like, we don't have a 5 kilo bag because we don't plant that many, so we're not digging that many to start with. You know, if you're looking for something, we can give you chip bags, smaller quantities of things, but we don't supply nurseries, we don't supply big conglomerates because we don't have that big stocks that people need. They bring those straight in out of Holland. That's where the majority of them are coming from. But the other things, the
more specialist, we focus on the rare specialist things that we've struggled to get anywhere else. So we've maybe got 1 or 2 of them and slowly built them up over the last few years. And now that we start to get in slightly larger quantities, then we have a few more that we can we bring along to sales.
The only thing that we don't grow are tulips. We can't compete with the Dutch on that. So we actually bring the tulips in. It's a friend who has a similar sized nursery in Holland. So he buys daffodils from us and we buy tulips from him. So we bring those in.
More just the run of the mill.
Run of the mill.
We have some species, unusual tulips that we grow ourselves. But the run of the mill ones, the
ones in the garden selection, 8 bulbs for £4. We can't compete with the Dutch on those. So we bring small quantities of those in, but everything else we grow here.
For some reason, Dave, when you're talking, you're breaking up, but Jules is perfectly clear. I don't know if it's positioning of where the microphone is in relation to the two of you. Maybe it is.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it's just that you're off center. Yours is kind of rattling a little bit, but Jules is perfectly clear. So it's just so that kind of leads me on to tulips, and spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. So tulips, obviously they're being used in all of the, I suppose, open gardens around the country. They're used for that early pop of color. There's huge amounts of them being planted, but they're so short term. And I was talking about this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. But it's funny, and I'm sure the show garden people know this, but generally the Joe public doesn't know, the ordinary gardener at home doesn't know that, like, daffodils you can get to flower from sometimes December right through to, I suppose, end of March, middle of April. Would that be
May?
End of May.
May.
We have we have ones, and especially the Division 9s that are later. they're only flowering the end of May, even the start of, depending on the weather that you're having in the season. But we can have ones still flowering right through to the end of May.
Yeah, I think that's something that should be sort of talked about a little bit more, because tulips and the way that tulips are being used and sold and distributed and planted, and then they're not coming back. There is no longevity in it. So from an eco perspective, it makes very little sense. But you can get so much flower. Okay, they're a different flower, but you can get so much flower and longevity from daffodils. But I don't think there's an awareness. I think it's a bit like what you said at the start, Dave. Your original thinking was you have these yellow trumpets and that's kind of it. And I think people do view them as being a sort of a small window around Daffodil Day that you get this flower. But to be able to have flower with the right selection from sort of December through to May, as you said, that's a long period of time. I know you might get little windows where you're missing a week or a few days, but like that's a long period of flower that I don't know that people are aware of. Would that be fair to say?
It is. It's when you're buying daffodils, it's looking at the season. So often, like within our catalogue, we would have if they are early season, mid-season, or late season. So you can plant a range of daffodils, but that will come out over a longer period of time. So it's, as I said, picking different varieties that will flower at different times of spring. And as you said, you can get ones, some very, very early ones that will come out end of December, beginning of January, all the way through till May. So there's a big period of time. But if you're picking a variety, if you pick one variety, that will have its slot that it will flower in. But it's, if you're planting them within a garden, it's a good idea to maybe pick an early one, pick a mid one, pick a late one. But you're stretching out that flowering period. Daffodils are suited to our climate. Ireland is renowned throughout the world as probably everybody assumes flowers, they assume the Netherlands. Okay, but daffodils, the breeding of daffodils, the hotbed of it for the last couple of 100 years has been Ireland. Right. And it's been the place that breeding and creating new daffodils has been going on throughout the world, going back to the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Conscious decision, and they actually recorded down what they were doing to make a new variety. That we trace back to Cork in the late 1800s. So, you know, it's mad to think that since then, people in Ireland have been purposely breeding to improve, to make better, to do, as you said, most people assume daffodils in Holland, but the actual more elite varieties and things like that, there's a big history in Ireland, throughout Ireland, from north to south, actually. There's a lot of...
And what you're saying about tulips, they're more difficult to grow. They're not overly suited. And the way that the Dutch have been breeding them, they've been breeding them for big, lousy flowers that are going to give you a fantastic display. They've not been breeding them for longevity. They want something that's going to... And where a lot of people make mistakes with the tulip is they don't plant them deep enough. And usually a daffodil, you'd be planting it 10 centimeters down. You always work along the lines of like imagining that there's two bulbs above the bulb when you put it in the ground. Where a tulip, you want it a good bit deeper. You almost want it to be going down almost a foot when you're planting a tulip. But when people plant them in the garden or plant them on roundabouts or whatever, they're not. They're planting them for like roundabouts and councils and so on. They will plant them, and it's a bedding, putting them in, and a couple of months later, they're not wanting it planted deep because they've got to come out and dig them all back out again. If you've got ones, you can get them good and deep. You've got a better chance of them coming back, or going more towards the species ones, closer, and the wilder, the smaller, more species variety. The ones that are more closely linked to the species have got a better chance of coming back year on year. But tulips, got to get them deep.
But it's almost self-fulfilling for the Dutch, because if you buy a tulip that you like and it flowers for the year and doesn't come back, well, you're going to go and buy another bag of them.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, it's self-serving.
Yeah.
They flower one year, that you're going to replace them. Whereas if you buy it and they keep flowering, you're not going to keep buying the bulbs.
Yeah. No, I do. I find tulips and the way that we're planting them these days a little bit frustrating, to be honest with you, and the amount of energy and effort that goes into it, and then they are a 1 year wonder. Okay, they do look good, but I'm not sure that people understand that the daffodils can give you so much as well. And I think that maybe is a key point, that you do need to look out for the early, mid and late season. With that in mind, just some of the varieties that you might have that would fall into each of those sort of flowering periods. Obviously you have 800 varieties, so it might be catching you a little bit on the spot here, but just some of the earlier ones, some mid and some late, just so people could sort of jot down some names that might work in their scheme.
Right then, early ones, we have one called Spring Equinox.
Okay.
Obviously the name is fairly early in the season. Firefighter is an early variety as well. Just trying to think what we would have at shows at different time. Mid-season, there's lots and lots mid-season. Pick Great Surprise, as I think I've already mentioned, it's fairly, that's middle to late. What else? Other ones that do particularly well at different times. Golden Peak is a nice traditional looking yellow one. All these are Irish varieties, all been bred. Soprano, which is a lovely small flowered one, a little white pink one. That's fairly late. Yeah, there's so many.
800 varieties. You're going to have lots. To take it back to yourselves and your catalogue. So you mentioned earlier on, like you have a catalogue that comes out every year. It's out quite early in the year. So tell us about that and what people find in it, and then the timescales. Obviously, you've already said, you know, you're lifting maybe 100 to 150 bulbs of certain varieties, or maybe less in some cases. So you're out early. I think you said around Patrick's Day with your catalogue. So explain the whole timelines, procedures, and how your catalogue works.
Okay, so we usually spend the winter updating the catalogue and updating the website. We decide which varieties we're going to introduce. We usually introduce about 10 to 12 new varieties every year. So people say, oh, I got a catalogue in 2020, I'll not take one from you. It's like, well, you had 21 introductions, 22 introductions, 23 introductions, you're sort of missing out on at least 3 dozen new varieties there. We separate them into, after the new introductions, then there's a section for miniatures, a section for intermediates. So if you are looking for the slightly smaller, you only have a small section to look at. And then the rest of the catalogue is split into the divisions. So again, easy to look at. We try and have it out around about St. Patrick's Day. It's an easy marker for us to work with. And that's usually, as Dave said, the start of the show season. So people can take the catalogue along. This is the shears. Oh, yeah. So they can take it along with them. They see a flower on the show bench that they like. They flick through. Oh, they have it. I'll just put a wee kiss beside it so that I remember that I like that one. They can take the book home. A lot of people said to us, oh, it costs a lot of money to produce a catalogue. Yes, it does. But we like to be able to flick through. We put a lot of photographs in. So every other page nearly is photographs. So you can actually compare variety with variety. You can fold down the corner, dog ear it, pick it up with your coffee now, come back to it a couple of days later, go to a show next week, take it with you. I like that one, but what does it actually look like on the show bench? Oh, that one there is actually even better. I'll put a wee mark beside it. I'll come home and I'll pick and choose which ones I like. Oh, that one's actually on offer. It's 3 for £10, so I can actually get 3 bulbs. That would improve my chance of getting a better flower because I've got 3 bulbs to choose from. So we're getting orders coming in very early on, especially for the new introductions. People are always watching out what new one are they putting out. So maybe ones that we've had as a seedling number, especially in the American market, they're looking all the time, what are they actually introducing this year? And then we would be taking orders all the way through till September time, usually.
Yeah.
Um,
We ended up this year, we have Instagram account, Facebook account as well. And we've been drip feeding just some of the photos of the new introductions, and that the website, the catalogue was going live. Mm-hmm. So we ended up doing an Instagram live, as you do, introducing and showing the people the website. And while we were still on the live, within the first 5 minutes, somebody had been waiting for the website to go live. And as we were on, the first order came in. It was like, oh, trying to cover up on the screen. Oh, the bing, and there's the first order coming in.
Yeah, yeah.
But we do have people that are waiting, desperately waiting, just because they know they want maybe one of the new introductions.
And we might only have 10 or 12 bulbs available for that season. So they want to make sure that they're getting one of those 12 bulbs, because they'll not get it till maybe next year otherwise. Yeah.
Just thinking here, your customer, so you're how many years in business did you say?
7. This is our 7th year.
So 7 years in business, and you would have seen people coming through the doors at the start, and they're collectors. What has the customer journey been like? Have you people who are with you every year or waiting for something off you every year, or have you somebody that wasn't a collector and has, come like you guys started off with maybe 2 or 3 varieties, and now they're actually, after getting hooked, and they're starting to build a collection?
Both, really. We have
every scenario.
Every scenario. We have customers that have been with us from year 1, and will every year put in an order, maybe just get a few different ones. And we have some people that, it's funny how different countries do different things. So US, UK, Europe, they tend to get more of the multi-packs, or there'll be 3s, 5s of a variety, whereas the Japanese tend to get one bulb of lots and lots of varieties. So that you'll end up with their order, it'll be page and a bit, and it'll be one. Whereas other countries, you maybe smaller selection of varieties, but bigger numbers. So it's funny how you get those.
Sometimes you might have had somebody who's ordered one because, say, for example, the girl who bought Lauren, they've bought one, and then usually when we send out an order, we will always send a gratis bulb as well. Okay. So we've had people come back and say, oh, you've sent us bulbs that we didn't order, not realizing it was a gratis. So they've got the gratis, and then when it's flowered, they've really liked it. So they've actually come back then and ordered whatever spring sunset. I can think of one lady who came back, and then every year since then, she bought, that might have even been Lauren actually, for her niece or something. It was a special birthday. So she bought a quantity of them, and I sent the gratis bulb of spring sunset. It's a lovely yellow pink. It came up. She was like, that's absolutely gorgeous. She came back, she ordered, and she has ordered a small quantity of different varieties. The more financially accessible ones, so the 3 for £10 or something like that. So she's put an order in. So it's gradually increasing, because I always keep a record of customers. And you can see the Japanese one, as Dave said, they'll come in and they'll be like 40, but it's all the newest ones, and it's 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And then they won't order for a year or 2, and then they'll order again, and it'll be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, but it'll be all this year's introductions plus last year's introductions. So they'll kind of save up their postage and buy a few. So
there's and then we have, when we were doing local talks and fairs and things, and even now on the website, we started doing this last year, we've done bulb mixes. So what we do is we take bulbs out of the pigeonholes, surplus bulbs. So they're the variety that we sell in the catalogue, and we put a mixed bag together. And then we have those at, as I said, talks and fairs and so on. And people get a catalogue at the same time. So that's part of the fun, where you end up getting a photograph being sent to you in early spring. Someone saying, I got a bag of mixed bulbs. This is one of them that's flowered. I think it's this. So they've gone through the catalogue trying to work out what it is.
Yeah.
I think it's peach snaps. Am I right? And so then we can email them back and say, yeah, I think you've got it spot on there. Or maybe it's not that one. Maybe it's Habari or a different variety. So it's great that people are then able to flick through. And again, that's the advantage with the catalogue as well, where they can peruse through and
so they can get a larger quantity of. They are all the show quality, because some people say, oh, well, I don't want just the cheapy ones. It's like, no, these are show. So you could have a £10 bulb, a £15 bulb, a £6 bulb in your bag. You're getting 10 flowering size bulbs for £4.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a way for us to make some money back on stock that we have that's surplus to what we need for our orders.
Yeah.
And it's a way of getting our flowers out there that somebody goes, oh, that's beautiful. I wonder what it is. They flick through the catalogue and maybe they go, oh, it might be that one. It might be that one. Do you know what? I'll order one of each of those. And then when they come, I'll know which one it is. And then the following year, I can order more of it because I really like that one.
Yeah.
Or they take it to a show and they win. And then they're hooked.
So you probably have a couple of different types of collectors there. So obviously the Japanese collector who's buying one of 40 different bulbs, like that's a specialist collector who's watching for specific varieties. But you might also have someone who's a collector, maybe has 30, 40, 50 varieties, may not be overly interested in the name, but is very interested in the differences of the flowers when they come out. So they're not overly bent down on the name part of it. Is more of the look in the springtime. So yeah, couple of other things spring to mind. You mentioned galanthus and snowdrops, that you're growing those, so obviously they're going to be available I suppose in the springtime in the green. That's how you do that. How many varieties? What have you got? Is there anything people should watch out for?
Again, it's a hobby that's slowly got out of hand. Dangerously. We started off when I initially started with the snowdrops, it was only picking a few because I wanted to be able to clearly see obvious differences with them. And then you get hooked and you're looking then at the minute differences between them all. We've got about 170-ish different varieties now.
I haven't counted the list.
Yeah, there's about 170. This summer we ended up taking on a lot of different varieties from a grower over in England.
Okay.
Who was retiring, and we got a lot from her. Now there was a lot of fun getting them over here with Brexit and so on. So we obviously we had to make sure everything was done properly. So with the snowdrops, we had to apply for a thing called the CITES certificate, which involved the Department of Agriculture, Board of Force, Kew Gardens.
Yeah, there's 5 different agencies involved in us bringing snowdrops from England home.
Wow.
So it was crazy. But
if you don't do it right, there's a 3-year prison sentence attached to it.
Because it had to be done right.
Because they're protected species, the same as ivory, they're protected.
Yeah, and nearly worse than that, there's a very high value consignment that could go wrong. So you don't want anything happening.
We got it all. We got it all sorted. Got them all back. So yeah, that increased our selection that we had by a good bit.
Yeah,
and we got some very unusual, very rare ones that there's a lot that haven't been introduced yet, or maybe there's been 1 or 2 bulbs sold previously, but watch this space.
Yeah, so again, we've spoke about it on the podcast before, but in the green in the springtime is by far the best way to grow snowdrops and to establish snowdrops in your garden.
Yes and no.
Yes and no, good.
Okay, we're selling them in the green, either buying them in a pot, or you can often, if you're buying from nurseries in the green, they will be knocked out of the pot, maybe wrapped in a little bit of moss and posted off. They're not drying out. You're getting them, the bulbs there, the bulbs nice and fresh. The roots are still lovely, and you potting them up, getting them in the ground. Great. Where people struggle with snowdrops, if they're buying them as a bulb, is those often when you're buying them in a hardware store or something like that, the small little Nivalis variety, which are naturally little small bulbs. and they could have been out of the ground for 3 or 4 months, so they desiccate very quickly. So snowdrops, ideally, if you're buying them from a nursery and they're selling them as just as a bulb, generally they're grand. If they've grown them, they haven't been out of the ground for too long, and they're basically being lifted, cleaned, and shipped. Generally they'll be fine. But the issue is when you buy them in the packet,
and they're coming a long distance,
and they've been dry, and they dry out very quick. So yes, ideally in the green, and also the advantage within the green, you actually see them flower. So if you go to some great snowdrop events around the country, and if you go there and they're all in pots and you can see them flower and you can see what you're getting, that's great.
Which you can't see as a bulb, obviously.
Yeah, you can't see it as a bulb. Getting towards the end now, but in terms of, so you guys have 800 odd varieties of daffodils around the country in Ireland, and I have lots of listeners in the US, so I'm sure there's big collections over there. But within Ireland, where would people see kind of, big collections of daffodils?
Well, one great collection is Caher Bridge Gardens in County Clare. A friend of ours who owns the garden, Carl Wright, has over the last probably about 10 years been collecting and building up. Now, a lot of them, majority of them come from us. He comes and helps plant the bulbs in the autumn. So he'll come up for a few days and gets paid in bulbs. So he comes up, and he's been here the last couple. He's only just away this morning
with a crate full of bulbs.
So he's gone away with lots and lots of new varieties to plant into the garden there. Amazing garden, and he's got a fantastic collection there. Blarney Castle is starting to build up a collection. We were down with them a couple of weeks ago, and with a lot of varieties. So they got some last year and they're building them up. So they've got a great collection there, slowly building a collection up there. Around the country, other places, Hillsborough Castle are starting to build up a collection there. It's still in its infancy, but they've got a few in there. The Botanic Garden in Belfast, in Belfast and in Dublin, have both got a selection of daffodils. We ended up, I'd been down to a talk down at the Botanic in Glasnevin a few years ago. Seamus O'Brien was doing a talk about one of his trips, and we were down there, and I was speaking to one of the members of staff there, and I ended up mentioning that there's a variety called Glasnevin, and they didn't realise. So we came back, I got them a bag of Glasnevin bulbs, sent them down, and they're in one of the beds over near the herbarium now. So they're planted there. So in the spring, there is Narcissus Glasnevin. That was a gift from us a few years ago.
Brilliant.
Belfield, Paul's starting to build up a collection there as well. So
and there's a big collection of snowdrops there as well, I believe.
Yes.
I haven't got over to see them yet, but I believe there is a big collection there.
Oh, it's amazing. You should.
Yeah, we were down with. They had one of the open days down in February. It was fabulous. Really, really good day.
Brilliant. We're starting to round off. I have a question related to general bulbs. Not what's your opinion on the trends that you see at the moment of lasagna planting? What's your opinion on it, just as a matter of interest?
Lasagna planting is just something that we have done for years. Whenever we've had surplus bulbs, it means that you can plant in the one container, and you will have continual colour. Because if you plant your tulips deep to the bottom, your daffodils in the middle, and then on the top, anything that's about the size of a crocus. So snowdrops, miniature tulips, miniature daffodils, crocuses. And then what I've done is just top it with winter pansy or primroses, so that when the bulbs aren't flowering, that you've still got some interest on the top of it. But we had ones outside our front door for over a year, because literally as one came up, then the rest, they were all following, and the primroses were there to add a bit of interest when there wasn't flowers. So
now with a pot, what's key to remember? If you're doing a lasagna pot, is you're probably talking about one season, 1 year, and that's it. Because the nutrients within the soil, within the compost and everything is going to run out. So you can have a lovely display, and then come the summer, knock them all out, either plant them then within the garden. But they are grand. They give you an interest. You can have something as one's going over, the next one's coming through. So the great little things.
Yeah, no, that's the reason I asked that question was I was speaking about it a couple of weeks ago. I'm not a fan of the lasagna planting. I do understand that it gives you the flower over a period, but I always find that the leaves of the one that's going over and the flower of the one that's going over takes from the next one that's coming through. And that was kind of what I was thinking, that
it's picking the right varieties though.
Okay.
And by having, if you're planting like the crocus, if you have your first one's crocus and they've flowered, if you pull off the little dead flowers on them, you don't really see the foliage from the crocus is fairly inconspicuous.
Yeah.
Depending again on the varieties of the daffodil, then you may put in. You can get something that you don't want, something that's maybe a foot in height and it's going to collapse. If you get something that's maybe an intermediate, which is shorter, smaller flowers, slightly finer foliage, again, it's not going to take away too much. And then afterwards, you could have your tulip, or you could have your fritillarias coming through, something like that. It's not just putting anything in. I can understand it's if you have stuff and you've got a big tall daffodil in it, and then you're waiting for the tulips to come through, and they've got the flowers are looking awful and so on. But if you pick the right ones, if it's going in a pot, you're probably not wanting really big tall ones anyway. You're wanting something a little bit. You could have your last one, your tulips being a big tall tulip. That's going to hide everything, but it's picking the right varieties.
I think they make gardening accessible for somebody who maybe doesn't have a garden, or for somebody who's elderly that can't. If you can set a pot outside their back door, I know a friend of mine actually bought bulbs and did the lasagna layering for her mother and her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law wasn't able to get out into the garden as she had been, and she sat for weeks literally watching the flowers come up and was taking pictures, going, look at this lovely one, look at this lovely, because they were all different as far as she was concerned, completely different things, and she got so much joy out of that. And my friend was like, I can't believe, like, for 3 bags for £10, she just got so much enjoyment out of that because she wasn't able to be out to access her garden. So for somebody like that, it makes the garden.
It definitely has its place, and if you're tight on space, for sure. And I guess if you're choosing plants maybe in a better way, you'll avoid the problems that I kind of envisaged with it. So Final question. I know there was a kind of a trend over the last few years towards pink colored daffodils. What's the current trend? Is it still pink, or is there kind of a new trend coming through?
We don't really see trends because obviously it's not the mass market that we're catering towards. People just want the best for their whichever show they are. But
slightly smaller.
But
because gardens are generally getting smaller, and people are the intermediates, the miniatures are more popular. Because with people not having the space, you can grow those either in pots or troughs, or maybe just a small flower bed. So the smaller ones are becoming more popular, and you're getting a bit more choice and a bit more availability in the miniatures. And the intermediates, I really like the intermediates, which are the halfway between, and they're not too tall, and they work well in pots, and they work well in the borders as well. So that's fairly popular.
Yeah, with the regular sort of public, that would be what, whenever we've been doing sales and talks, people are looking for things that aren't too tall. So the intermediate size wise ones are, and the miniatures definitely would be.
Very final question. Your top tips for after your daffodils have finished flowering. So there's lots of people tie them up, and
Oh, don't do that.
this is what I like to hear. So some people tie them up, some cut them off obviously too early. So what should you do?
Right, ideally you want to leave them as long as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people want nice, tidy, formal. So in the past, it was always bend them over a little elastic band or braid them. We've seen that before as well.
Yeah.
They've obviously got far too much time if they've got the time to braid all the petal, all the foliage up. So the best thing you can do is pull the heads off. So once the flower's gone over, just run your hand over the top and just pull the head off the flower. Leave the stem, the flower stem as well if you can. Just take the head off. That means all the energy from the foliage is going down into the bulb for next year. Whereas if you leave the bud at the top of the stem, the energy is going up to produce seed. So take the head off. And then the main thing is just leave it as long as possible. Now, there's certain places where people struggle. So it's where you're planting them. So down our driveway, we've got them planted through the grass, but we've got them against the next to the fence. So we can leave a strip, about a foot strip against the fence, where we can leave it to grow a bit longer, and let the grass grow up through and the daffodils to die down naturally. In the flower beds, it's packing other things around them, so the herbaceous perennials start coming up, and you don't really spot the daffodil foliage dying away, and you want to leave it as long so it's almost going brown and dying fully. And that means, because the leaves are like the solar panels of the plant, and they're feeding the bulb for next year's flower. And where people run them over with the lawnmower, cut them all off, you're starving it, and that's why often they don't come back, or eventually you're getting leaves but no flowers. So the main thing, leave them as long as possible.
Okay, great tip.
Somewhere that you don't like the mess if you don't want them.
So before we finish off now, your catalogue typically comes out around St. Patrick's Day, so direct people to where they can access that, your website. You've mentioned your social channels, so maybe tell people where they can find you and how they can get in contact, or if they have specific things that they're chasing or looking for, how they can get in contact with you guys.
Yeah, well, the website is there all the time. It'll just say not available until spring, whatever, but you can still search for all the varieties that we have. So it is www.eskerfarmdaffodils.com. It's all one word. Brilliant. And it's Esker, not Eskra. That's a different townland.
And you'll find, so obviously on Instagram and Facebook as well, it's Esker Farm Daffodils. And perfect. And
send a message.
Send us a message, DM us, or
we might not get straight back, but we'll get there. If it's there, we know it's there, and we'll respond.
And then if people are wanting a catalogue, we send them out in the spring. And they can either drop us an email, or there's contact details on the website where people can just register or send us a message, and we add the address down to the mailing list, and we post them out February, March time.
Brilliant.
Usually. Yeah.
Brilliant. So it's been really interesting chat. As I said at the start, this is not your run-of-the-mill, stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap type bulbs. This is, specialist. This is classier type bulbs, and obviously a lot of love and attention goes into it with the whole family involved in it as well. So Dave and Jules, thank you very, very much for coming on Master My Garden podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So that's been this week's episode. A huge thanks to Dave and Jules. Really interesting chat. Lots of great tips in there. And if you are after, things that are a bit more special, if you're looking for something that might have your name in it, have a look on the website. You might find something there that has your name on it. And as I say, specialist growers based in Ireland. So it's great to see businesses like that. Great to hear a bit more detail on the divisions. I was aware of divisions, but not really what they meant, to be fair. So great to hear more on that as well. And there's lots there. So check them out on their website, on their social channels, and ideal place to start building your daffodil collection. It probably will, as it has for Dave and Jules, become a bit of an addiction, and maybe at some point you'll end up with hundreds as well. But definitely a great place to start. So That's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, happy gardening.